Today, my friend and I are pulling back the curtain on our ayahuasca experiences. So, are you curious what it's like to drink a brew that promises to reveal the universe's mysteries? Well, join us as we unpack our experiences and delve into the highs, the lows, and insights we gained along the way. Also, stay tuned to the end to hear about what we wish we knew before going into this experience. This is the diary of the soul, because behind every face is a story, and behind every story is a lesson. Before we plunge into the depths, let's kick things off with a little bit of sunshine. So, an opening tradition for this podcast is to talk about one thing, big or small, that you did yesterday that brought you some joy.
Ooh, yesterday I did a yoga class I really loved near my house. Is one of my favorite teachers, so I really just love her 60 minutes of pure joy and like teachings of yoga. So that made me really happy. And their son in Netherlands. And you?
Yesterday was one of those days where it felt like all of my errands kind of
Mm.
clumped together. So it was kind of rush, rush, rush. But by the end of the day, I went to my parents' house, and they live in the suburbs, but they live on the edge of a forest in the suburbs, so it doesn't really feel like the suburbs. And when I got there, I just sat in their
Mm-mm.
backyard and just relaxed and did nothing, and it was such a nice experience to not have, like, electronics or, like, errands just kinda, like, weighing me down and making me feel like I needed to get something done. It was just a moment of stillness, so I really
I love that.
appreciated that. Let's set the stage. What's something that people should know about you, and why did you decide to do
Oof,
ayahuasca?
diving right into it.
Yeah, of course.
I think that time it kind of came to me. I wasn't really searching for an ayahuasca retreat per se, but it was kind of in the program of a retreat that I've been eyeing for quite some time. And when I got the brochure, I saw that on day 5 it was part of the program for ceremonies. I was like, oh my gosh. So I didn't actually intentionally sign up, but it kind of found me, and I started preparing for that afterwards.
Okay. Had you known about anyone in your circle that had done ayahuasca, or were you kind of the first person in your orbit to do that?
Yeah, I have a few friends here, a bit more on the hippie side, and they've all experimented ayahuasca a few times. So I feel like I am with a few experts, I would say.
Right.
I've heard a lot of experiences, good, bad, mediocre, and I knew that it was something I really wanted to try.
So I think I'd
Yeah.
heard about it 5 or 6 years ago, in the sense of, like, I heard about it and I wanted to do it. And I think for me, it was waiting for the right moment for it to happen. And so
Mm.
last year, my life fell apart. I got a divorce and I ended an 11-year relationship. And then I quit my job. And then I moved from the Netherlands back to the United States. And then after I moved back home, my dog died. And so it was
Oh
sort of
wow.
like this domino effect of saying goodbye to a lot of things in life. And then I realized before I started rebuilding my life, I wanted to have somewhat of a gap just before I start that process. And so I planned my around the world trip. And when I was planning that, that's when I realized this is the perfect opportunity to do ayahuasca. And so that's when I started looking into retreats.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess my journey started a little bit before as well. In 2020, I started doing well. Truffles here are legal in Netherlands, so I
Right.
was doing a lot of psychedelic therapy, and I feel like I've been preparing myself a bit since 2020. COVID was a dark time for me, and I feel like
For a lot
every
of
month,
people.
yeah, yeah, right. Every month I would do these like psychedelic therapy with like a trance dance or ceremonies, and I felt like I was working my way up slowly to ayahuasca. And then a similar experience as you, not but 2022, going through a really difficult breakup with my ex of 5 years, saying goodbye to that, and also processing so much grief as well during COVID. All my grandparents have passed away during COVID,
Oh, wow.
and they're all in China, so obviously I couldn't go there to have like a closure with this. And I was just like sitting with myself and all these emotions, I couldn't travel. I'm jealous of you, like you can have a year off. I wanted that for myself, but I couldn't. And this was
Right,
the
the
first
world was locked
retreat.
down.
Yeah, it was a bit wild. So I think it also happened. I think we're always like searching for something. When you're going
Mm.
through a lot of like you're processing so many emotions, too many things at once. This is kind of the best way to sit with yourself. And it was we both sat with her. You can it was a very confrontational experience.
Yeah, of course. And how did you know that particular retreat was right for you? Were you looking for certain requirements out of a retreat or
Mm.
recommendations, or how did that work?
I think that year I fell in love with a lot of sound healing. So I grew up with a lot of music, and my grandmother actually taught me piano, and I really wanted something to like connect me closer to my grandmother. So I was looking for sound healings like crystal baths, um, yeah, mantra singing, kirtans. So I was kind of searching for this general area, and I found this mystical music retreat, and I found them on Google, I think, or bookretreats.com. And I just love the energy, the pictures, the reviews. It just had really nice vibe to it. So I was doing like months of research and I landed on this retreat for the musical part, actually. I put the deposit down and then they sent me the brochure. It was ayahuasca. I was like, oh, all
I
right.
guess I already paid, so we're gonna do this.
Yeah, I was like, I guess I'm committed to it. And maybe I don't feel like I would have done it myself, like approach an ayahuasca center at that time. I was still looking for healing, like something soft. And in my mind, before doing it, I thought it was a really intense experience.
Right. But it is cool that you had something that you wanted to get out of it, so more along the
Mm,
music lines, and then also something that was a bit more unknown to, like, push your
yeah,
boundaries, so bringing those 2 things
definitely.
together sounds like a cool process.
Yeah. How did you find yours?
I had the requirement that I wanted it to be a small retreat,
Mm,
and I know that a lot of the retreats that I was looking at initially were, like, 15, 20 plus people. And just with how I am with strangers or big crowds or my social anxiety, I just knew that I needed something a bit more intimate so that I wouldn't, focus on that and focus instead on the ayahuasca part of it. And so when I was looking online, I looked at retreat.guru, which I use as my jumping off point, and you can filter different kind of retreats on there by location or price or if there's yoga and what medicine components are included. And then I also looked on the ayahuasca subreddit, and then
oh,
between those two I found my retreat center, which is called Wilkamayu Spirit, which means sacred river in Quechua. And what I really liked about them is when I was looking through their social media presence, it was all small, intimate groups, and they don't do retreats larger than 6 people. And so
oh, wow.
that
Very intimate.
right, that and then the fact that when I reached out to them initially, they answered, like, all of my crazy questions, from the jump without me paying a deposit, and I
Mm.
really wanted to know, like, "What's your medical procedure in case there's, like, an emergency?" So, they were just very warm and welcoming and receptive, and so after going through that process of calming me down, then I was like, "Yeah, this is
Mm.
definitely the retreat center that I want."
Oh, wow. How long was your retreat for?
Mine
How many
was
days?
3 days, which included 2
Oh.
ceremonies, but then I stayed
Mm,
an extra day, which I'm really glad that I did, and I'll get more into that later when we get into our
mm.
experiences. But how long was your retreat?
It was 12 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but the purpose wasn't ayahuasca itself. It was just kind of like the intention was to heal through music. So we did like ice baths, we did temazcal ceremonies, yoga, breath work. It was like all the healings in one. And I think it kind of like hit its peak with the ayahuasca in the middle, and then integration, sharing, song circles. So it was a very long. I loved it though. You really bonded with the group.
Yeah, of course, if you're vulnerable with someone that
Yeah.
intensely, it kinda
Mhm.
forces you to find your friendship with them.
Yeah, every day we had the opening circles, closing circles, and everyone was just like in tears at the end of the retreat. Like day one, you're strangers, and like day 12, you're family.
Of course.
Like I love all of them so much.
Yeah, and how many ayahuasca ceremonies did you have as part of that retreat?
It was just one night.
Okay, nice. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's perfect when you add all the other things that you did with that experience. I think if you were doing
Mm.
multiple, it probably would be too much.
I agree, yeah. Also, for my first time, I was a bit scared to do more than just drink more than one.
And for your retreat, did you have sort of like a preparation list or a diet that you had to follow ahead of time?
Yeah, they sent us a brochure of what we should follow, but I also did my own research online because there's just so much information out there. And I really did a strict like vegan diet for a full month beforehand, which was tough because the retreat was in mid-January. So I started mid-December, but my Christmas and New Year's was like very, very tame. I couldn't
Oof.
eat anything. I was like, I'm the vegan at Christmas dinner. you know, New Year's Eve, like, oh, no champagne for me. It was it was tough to say no to these vices of mine, but also I was like, I'm doing it for a greater purpose, you know? This is like for my own healing. And I really, yeah, I loved how I felt leading up to it and after as well.
Yeah, that's a tough part of the year because the end of the year
Yeah.
is sort of when you celebrate with,
Mhm.
alcohol and all these rich foods and coming together. So, yeah,
It was
doubly
tough.
hard. And what was the hardest thing for you to actually give up out of all of that?
Looking back on it, it wasn't that hard, but I feel like the drinking aspect, just because it was New Year's, I felt a lot of pressure from friends. Like I do feel like my personality and how I interact with friendships now are a bit different post ayahuasca. I think before I'm such a people pleaser, and I'm not really a big fan of drinking actually, but I feel like I would just drink because to blend in or whatnot. But I've been stronger in saying no and listening to my boundaries, but it's still a process now, like as you know. It's not like you snap your fingers overnight,
Yeah.
like you're like the next like wise ayahuasca person. But
Oh, I know, I get that, and especially with
yeah,
drinking because it's so socialized,
it's
especially
so
for our
social.
generation, it's like you do an
Yeah,
activity with drinks, and that's
exactly.
how most of our life is.
100%. I realized how much of my like social gatherings are focused around drinking. Like, let's go wine tasting. Let's get a beer at a bar. Let's go to a wine bar. Literally every plan revolves around alcohol, and I was like, are my friends alcoholics? Like, am I an alcoholic?
Yes.
Just doubting me. Well, we have the same friends, so
Yeah, yeah, true.
you know them.
Yeah, so I had a similar preparation, in terms of they sent over a list of you need to give up, pretty much all meat. You can eat like fish and some chicken, but the goal is to give up all meat, canned food, caffeine, alcohol, recreational drugs, sexual
Mhm,
activity, including
mhm,
masturbation, dairy, and some of those things were easy for me to give up because they weren't staples in my diet, but it was definitely very hard to give up dairy and sex.
Yeah.
But I mean, just because for dairy, I mean, yogurt and whey protein are kind of staples in my diet every day.
Mm.
So I kinda had to, like, get used to that, and of course, cheese. I mean, I could just be in a bathtub full of cheese, just, like, eating my way out, but, it was, like you said, nice to challenge myself to give up those things and kinda
Mhm,
slowly change my relationship with them. So it's not something that I need to have all of the time now. It's like I can take a step back and say, "Okay, well, I don't need to have, these things for a month or 2 and I'll be okay." Um, and then the second thing, obviously was giving up sex because I realized how much I use that as a way to self-regulate. Even
yeah.
masturbation, it's like part of my ritual to feel better or to feel good. And so to take a step back from that and think about, okay, why is this something that you jump to or go to self-regulate? And what's something that you can replace it with? Because I don't know about you for your, like, diet preparation, but they also sent over activities that we should do instead, and thinking
Oh,
about, like, meditating more, journaling more, spending more time in nature, making music.
mhm.
So it was
Mm.
kind of like taking away some things, but also making sure you add other things in life that are good for you.
Yeah, I had a similar experience as well. But it was kind of nice to they recommended, staying off your phone, not really taking too much content like Netflix all night, being really more mindful of like what you're ingesting in your body, through your eye, through your nose, like your senses, just basically surrounding yourself with good things that can help you have a good journey. So I think the
Right.
diet was the easiest for me to control. The rest I think I was being mindful already with yoga and whatnot, but yeah, the sex thing was also very difficult. I forgot about that. I kind of blocked it out.
Yeah.
But it was like Christmas time and anyway New Year's. It was a lot of family time, so but it wasn't as tough beforehand. It was tough after though.
Right. Yeah. And, I don't know if you found this too, but at least when I was researching, there are different schools of thought, when it comes to preparation. There's definitely a
Mm,
spectrum, and on that spectrum, I feel like there are people that think that it's complete BS to some
yeah.
people that believe that preparation is key because it kind of unlocks the power of the plant and makes it a
Hmm.
more powerful experience for you.
How long did you prepare for?
So they told me to start 3 days before and then
Mm,
obviously continue doing, those rituals and giving up those things during, and then also 3 days after. And for everything, I started 7 days before, but for some things, I started a month before. So it's kind of like a
mm,
gradual downshifting.
yeah, nice.
We're almost to our retreats.
Hmm.
I kind of want to touch base on what emotions and thoughts you were going through, like in the days just before your retreat.
Oh gosh, everything. Well, at this retreat, I was like processing a lot of grief and sadness from my relationship ending. That was kind of like the culmination, the 1 year anniversary almost. So it was just like 1 year of loss and also process. Well, my intention for going to the retreat was also connect with my grandmother and grandfathers in spirit. Just like overthinking so many things, my life, my job, a lot of anxiety. Also, winter here is depressing, as you know, in Netherlands. So
Right.
I was just like really down on myself and hard on myself. So there's a lot of anxiousness leading up to it. Yeah. I would say very unsettled going into it and also really nervous,
Oh, wow.
scared. Yeah, I was not in a good place.
Yeah. Were there any moments where you thought about turning back and think, "You know what? I'll just scrap the deposit. I'm not gonna do
I
it."
mean, I think we were with a group. I felt like they kept telling us every day, like, it's not a mandatory ceremony for us to participate in. So, like, when I got there day one, I was like, okay, I can always turn back, like, I can just sit it out, go journal in my room, go to the pool. We were staying in a really nice, luxurious place. So I was like, I could fill my
Mm,
time, go to a cenote. But I feel like as the
right.
retreat went on, day one, like bonding with everybody. Day two, we had Temescal. Day three, we had like Wim Hof breath work. Every day, like peeled off these layers of fear and anxiety. And I felt myself becoming more and more open. And by the time ayahuasca came around, we were all family and we were all committed. Like we were holding this space for all like 15 of us, I think it was about. And all of us were in it for healing and also to support each other. Like half the group was also first timers, and I think all the veterans, I guess, in some way, were really, really supportive and welcoming. So I didn't feel scared anymore by the time like I had to do it. I felt safe.
That kinda reminds me of how I felt too, because I was nervous, excited, I would say, beforehand. The nervousness just came from the fear of not knowing
Hmm.
what would actually happen, because you can read about people's experiences, but everyone's experience is unique and it doesn't really inform what's going to happen with you. But also excited just to survive it and be like, yeah, I did it and I gained this insight from it. So those were like the predominant feelings I had, but I did have two experiences beforehand that kinda help diminish the nervousness and enhance the excitement. And one of those was talking to you when we're in
Oh.
Italy about your experience, because it's like I said, it's one thing to read, someone's firsthand account
Hmm.
online, but when there's a person in your orbit that you can ask follow-up questions and, get some more known parts of the experience, it doesn't feel like this weird thing that you're getting into that no one knows about,
Yeah.
you know? Um, and just seeing how you talked about it and how it changed your energy made me really excited to have that retreat experience. And then the second thing that helped me was just being at the retreat, which sounds very simple, but just getting to the setting and just realizing that it was this safe feeling space with, really old stone architecture and colorful gardens and all these little nooks for you just to rest in and reflect and talk to people. It felt like a very safe space. So I was like, okay, this is going to be all right.
Yeah, definitely.
When you got to your retreat center, what was, I guess, the general vibe or the setting, and what were the rituals that kicked off your ayahuasca part of the retreat?
The retreat center I was staying at was like a eco hotel, so it was kind of these wooden lodges built into the forest and like the jungle, I guess, more in Mexico. And we all had our little huts, and there was a little wooden shala in the middle of the woods where we practiced yoga every day. So this space was where we did our
Mm,
opening circles, we did our mantras or meditations. I feel like from day one it carried really good energy. So to do ayahuasca there felt really safe. Like I've been there every day for 7 days already, and it was really nice to feel. It felt familiar. It felt really comfortable. We started in the evening, which I was not prepared for, and we also hadn't eaten all day. I think you fasted.
yeah, as
You
well.
fasted as well, right? I remember there was like one point in the day, I was like laying on this hammock staring at the trees. It was very beautiful, but then I was like, could I eat this leaf? I started like,
You start getting
yeah,
desperate.
every plant and like berry and like squirrel that passed by, I'm like, I was like seeing nature in a whole different way, but like in a predator way, which I don't know if was like the healthiest.
Yeah, it's funny how your mentality will change when you're basically starved.
Yeah, but it was very clear. I mean, I journaled so much the day of, and I also cried a lot the day of. I've been crying basically every day during this retreat, just processing. Like everything was so open. And yeah, it was like sundown. Everyone had all the yoga mats. We all had blankets. We sat in like kind of like a circle, and the shamans were in the middle with all their musical instruments. And yeah, we all had like blankets and pillows, and we all brought them from our own beds. So I feel like it felt like we were making a little bed for ourselves with my pillow, which I threw up on, but that's a later story. It felt like you were taking your like comforter from home and like making a little safe space there. And I wore like my PJs. I felt like a little sleepover, with like all my
Right.
best friends from the retreat. So I really like that. Um,
Oh, nice.
yeah, it felt like really cozy. The first ceremony we did was the rapé, the ground tobacco. Did you also have that before ayahuasca?
No, and when you were telling me about that, I was kinda nervous just about how it would make, like, my nose feel, but they didn't have that part of the ceremony at
Oh
my
goodness,
retreat, so I
yeah.
lucked I lucked out.
Well, when I walked in, the shamans were already there, and they were doing rapé to each other, and they also had the rapé tool to like to do it yourself, and they were just like spitting tobacco into these buckets, and I was like, what is going on here? And then they asked us one by one to come take this, and I was like, what? Like, what am I putting in my? I thought we were doing ayahuasca. Like, this looks like some other kind of thing. But they said that it really helps us to ground yourself upon entering the space, and we also do it at the end of the ceremony as well. And everyone did it, and I felt a little bit pressure to do it just because I'm a people pleaser at heart. So
Right.
yeah, I was like, if everyone's gonna do it, I guess I'll do it too. But I mean, that shit grounded me so much because I was like nervous. I think I peed like 4 or 5 times in between going to the bathroom. I was like nervous peeing. But then when I took the rapé, I had to lay down. I was like so dizzy. I don't smoke really, so tobacco hit me pretty hard. They blow it up your nose in this like super long, beautiful wooden pipe, and I was just like high off tobacco for a minute, and I couldn't like think. I didn't have enough brain cells to be nervous. I was just like, focus on breathing and like letting this pass through. So yeah, that like it did the job.
Did they say that's what the purpose was, to ground you and sort of
Hmm.
get you out of your thoughts and more into your body?
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'll
Okay.
do that, I guess.
So at my retreat center, they didn't do that, but they did kind of like pour, I don't know what it's called. I would say it's almost like a liquefied smelling salt into your hand. And so it gave a really powerful vanilla mint smell, and it had a tingly sensation to it. And then they advised us to rub it on our faces. And in doing so, it really kind of grounds you to that like tingly menthol flavor. And I think that's sort of what they used in place of the rapé. So I'm imagining that was the process that kinda got us out of our heads and into our bodies, but I'm kinda glad I didn't have your experience.
I mean, I've done rapé since after
Yeah.
for other ceremonies, and I do feel like my very first time was the strongest rapé I've ever had. And I've asked other retreat attendees, I was like, "Was that strong?" Because I couldn't move. They're like, "No, that was a lot." So it's it was an intense first time.
Well, you had the worst at least, so then, anything
Yeah,
after that should
yeah.
be a walk in the park.
It's been softer since. I do like it in like smaller doses.
Right. So mine was in Peru. I was in the Sacred Valley, which is in the southern part of
Mm.
Peru. It's in a valley that's in the Andes mountain range. And it was outside of a town that was like 16,000 people. And immediately when I got there, I kind of told you I felt very safe just because it felt very old and rustic. And there were
Mm.
just so many places to relax. And in the hall where we did ayahuasca, it sounds like it was a similar setup to yours, where we each kind of had our own little bed. And on our beds, we had all these blankets and pillows, and of course, our bucket if we needed to purge.
Yeah.
And we all showed up in our pajamas and made sure that we're just, as comfortable as possible. And we needed to make sure we had a lot of blankets because in Peru in June, it can get
Mm.
very hot during the day, because you get, the sun shining down on you. But once the sun disappears over the mountain range, it drops from, the mid 70s down to freezing. And so we were doing our ayahuasca ceremonies at night. And I remember distinctly, like needing to cocoon into my bed because I'm like,
Mm.
it's so fucking cold. But
Oh wow.
again, that was also an experience that helped ground me to my body because 'cause I'm just like, "How do I
Mm.
keep, all my extremities as warm as possible?" Um, and there were only 2 other people actually doing the retreat with me. So, yeah, very intimate. So 3 people in total drinking ayahuasca, and then the maestro who was leading, and then the facilitator. And we had a facilitator because our maestro only spoke Spanish. And so the facilitator was there to be the bridge in communication since he spoke English and Spanish. And we did 2 retreats, and the rituals around them kinda were the same, which was, doing that, like, liquefied smelling salt to sort of, like, get your, focus into your body, and then
Mhm.
also the maestro would walk around and blow smoke on everyone's body to, like, prepare their spirit for Mother Aya, and then after that, we would drink the tea, and that was a whole process.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like time stood still the first like 10 minutes. You're like, what do I do? Do I go next?
Right.
Because it's like you're it's not like in a clockwise, you're not like in a meeting, like, okay, passing the popcorn to you. It's like whoever feels called to drink naturally. It was never like an order to this. So I was like, do I go? Does she go? Like it was confusing.
Oh,
We
okay.
had a bigger group. It was like 15 of us. And then the shamans also brought a few people from their camp. I think there are maybe two other guests doing like a dia test with the shamans independently. And
Hmm.
this is part of their drinking night as well. So then they also came to our ceremony.
Ah, okay. And were they just observing or were they also drinking?
They were also drinking.
Oh, wow.
Everyone in the room drank.
Yeah, crazy. Um,
Mhm.
so what were your first few moments like after you drank the tea?
We sat in silence at first, and I was just really in my head still. I was like, okay, do I feel anything? Do I not? 'Cause you kind of psych yourself out of it, and it's completely dead silent. And then I started hearing this one cricket, and that sound got louder and louder, and I started hearing like more crickets, and I feel like my hearing just became like a Superman hearing eventually, and I just heard like every sound. Well, the shala, it was like an open shala. So we only had mosquito nets around it, but it was fully open. So like we felt the wind, like the leaves rustling, like
Oh,
all the
wow.
sounds of nature were like encircling us. And I was just so attuned into like my environment. Like I can feel the energy of like all the bugs around me, like the mosquito. Like I was just like razor sharp and tuned in for a while,
Mm.
just focusing on the sounds and the temperature. It was dead silent. It was a bit creepy actually, but the nature sounds like became alive.
I just realized how much I wasn't in nature, even though the retreat center itself had a lot of nature, the place where
Yeah.
we had ayahuasca was inside, so that
Mm.
part of the experience was blocked off. But I don't remember being very in tune with the sounds of my environment. I remember feeling very queasy for the first 30, 40
Already.
minutes. Yeah, and
Mm.
I had the sensation that I was gonna throw up, and I would tell myself, "There's a bucket right there. You can throw up. It's totally fine." That's part of the process for a lot of people, and when I would tell myself that, then my body would like, "No, I'm not gonna throw up." Just sort of like a sassy contrarian, so, it's kinda funny to see, like, that cycle keep happening over and over again, and I actually never ended up purging in that way. And I talked to the shaman about it. I was asking, is that a normal response? And he said, well, there's multiple ways to purge. It doesn't have to be you throwing up. And I realized that all
Mm.
of my purging was through my tears. At the come down of both of my ceremonies, I was just crying and crying and crying.
Mm.
So you definitely purge in different ways.
Yeah, definitely.
What were, I guess, the visions or experiences that you had when you took ayahuasca?
Hmm. There's so many. I guess while we're on the topic of purge, I feel like my strongest vision was as I was purging because it was like I think I purged maybe like hour 3 or 4. I think the time is a weird concept when you're on ayahuasca. So
Yeah,
somewhere in the middle of the night, I kept like getting up, laying down, getting up, laying down. I was like in this cycle, like you said, like in your head, do I need to throw up? Do I not? And you're starting questioning yourself. And then I felt this like overwhelming like movement of energy come out. And I like brought my hair tools. Like I had a whole kit of like what I needed to throw up. I was like, I had a hair tie ready, I had my essential oils with my breath mint.
spritz around.
I had yeah, like none of that happened. It was like a very fast, like so my hair was not up. It was just like my puke was going down my hair, like down my clothes and on my pillow as well that I had to sleep in later, which was like
Beautiful.
great. But in this process, like I saw my hair, like it was like it started going into the earth and it started like becoming like roots.
Mm,
And then in my vision, but I felt like I was the tree and I was rooting here within myself. And that was my strongest lesson of like, I am home. Like I realized I flew all the way to Mexico. My retreat was in Mexico. I flew, 8 hours to do
mm.
ayahuasca. And I was like, okay, but home is here. I didn't need to go all the way here. Yeah, everything comes from here. So I really love that sense of self-love, and I felt
Yeah.
like I was my own tree. And I could be planted anywhere, and like I still have my roots.
I think that's especially poignant for an expat, because so much of your life is
Mm,
living in a different culture. And so
yeah,
recognizing that home is sort of within you instead of the places that you live, is kind of a beautiful sentiment.
yeah. That was a very deep lesson. It's so simple, but they're always like, a home is where the heart is, but it's
Yeah.
never. I like saw it. I saw the root growing from my hair down as I was purging ayahuasca. I was like, oh, okay, this is the lesson I needed. Like I had to do all this to get that. Like,
Yeah. That's funny. Because I had a similar experience in that the lesson that I took from it was very simple, something that you could easily look up online or read in a self-help book. But I think the power of ayahuasca is that it confronts you with this lesson in a very personal, spiritual space. And
mm,
so when that happens, it gives it a lot more weight than just reading a line in a book that kind of tells you the same thing. And I think that's sort of what, gives it more power. Because for me, when I was first coming up on it, I guess I would describe it as this vast network that was multidimensional and multicolored, and it
mm,
was a network of consciousness. And everyone was
mm,
in that network of consciousness. Me, all of my friends, my family, all beings in the universe, they were all connected. And I was just sort of swimming through this network. And all of a sudden I stopped because one of the parts of the network kind of grew into a bigger being, and I would describe it as sort of like a primordial insect. It was almost like a
mhm,
bee-like figure, and
mm,
as soon as it popped into my path, I immediately had, like, these really in-depth conversations, and I was asking this bee all these questions, like, "Where do I go in life next?" "How do I pivot? How do I close out the last chapter of my life where I had to say goodbye to all of these things?" And I'm asking the bee these questions in English, and she's responding to me with, like, little packets of information, and these packets hit me, and then they turn into, like, a series of images in my mind. So it's like this really weird conversation dynamic where I'm asking questions in English, but receiving the answer as pictures and trying to decipher,
cool.
what she's trying to tell me. And the overarching answer was that you can go through your stages of grief, with anything that you've had to say goodbye to. You can be angry about it, you can be in denial, you can be sad, but eventually you need to move to a place of acceptance and a specific kind of acceptance where you let something go with love.
Mm,
And
mm,
I guess a concrete example I'll give is that I was very angry about how the last year of my marriage was and how it fell apart, and very sad that that was the end of the story I had with someone who was very important to me. That's arguably one of the most important relationships in your life is the relationship you have with your partner. And Mother Aya was sort of telling me, look, there was a lot of love in the beginning part of your relationship, and you two have accomplished a lot. But eventually, you got to a point where you outgrew one another, and you don't want to be in a relationship with someone where they're holding you back or you're holding them back. And so,
mm,
for us to be better versions of ourselves, we kind of had to let each other go and go our separate ways. And that changed my perspective on how I looked at my divorce because it made me realize, well, yeah, I want my ex to be happy and to thrive just as much as I want to be happy and thrive. So if that happens with us disconnected, then that's the best route for both of us. And now I can look at it with less anger and sadness and more hope
mm.
and happiness that we're going to go off and do better things without one another. And it was a complete paradigm shift for me when I thought about it that way. But, that was sort of like the lesson she kept giving me with all the things that I had to say goodbye to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have an intention going to your ceremony? Was there something you wanted to get out of it?
Yeah, I wanted to get so many things out of it.
You're like,
Like
here's a list.
yeah, exactly. But part of that list included, where do I go next? Like, where do I pivot in life? And then also, how do I process all of the grief from the past year? So
Mm.
those two intentions were answered, but I did have like a list of like 10 things. I was like, I also want
Yeah.
to like fix all my social anxiety, all my childhood traumas. And then I want to
Yeah.
see my grandparents so I can say goodbye to them,
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
died when I was young. So it was just,
Mm.
it's so funny how like you have this laundry list of things that you may request, but obviously ayahuasca is going to give you the things that you need most in that time. Um,
Mm.
but what about you? What were your intentions?
Yeah, I also search for a retreat during the Chinese New Year because usually I go back to see my grandparents in 2022 was like late January. So I wanted to have this be a moment where I connect with them spiritually. I had this whole like family like reconciliation and like grief of their passing. Um, I didn't get any of that. That was my one intention actually. So I wanted to
Right.
do it for Chinese New Year, but instead it was like a cycling through of just the toxins I put through my body because I feel like I was really partying too much after my breakup. Whether that was like sleeping with men and like doing some drugs or just eating bad for my body. Like I really felt really dirty of all those things. And also because I've been eating so clean for the months leading up to ayahuasca, I felt like my body was a temple. And at a whole moment, I was like, I am Shirley, and this is my temple. I am
Yeah.
Shirley Temple. Like I was like, oh my god, this is so genius. At that time, yeah, but just thinking, like my body's a temple and really treating it with love and care. And I really feel like that lesson I carry through afterwards as well. But also, I felt like I didn't have enough self love to treat my ex in the right way as well. I was
Right.
really harsh with my words, harsh with my friends. When you're not coming from a good place, you can't be a good person to other people. So
Exactly.
I felt like I did a lot of work on myself there and loving myself first so that I can be more giving of love to others after.
Hmm. Definitely.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's the starting off point, right? So you can ask for all of
Mm,
these things, but until you sort of reconcile the relationship you have with yourself first, you can't really like go out
yeah.
and sort of repair the things that you have with other people that are wrong. So it
Yeah.
makes sense from that aspect that you have to fix that first.
Hmm. I know I sent so many of my friends all these like loving text messages the next day, and they were like, what are you?" I even went to my ex being like, "I love you so much. Like I care a lot for you." And he was like, "Who is this?"
New number, who dis?
Yeah, he was like, "This is not Shirley." Like what?
Oh my
And,
gosh,
I
that's
sent it to
hilarious.
my mom. I was like, yeah, all the love. I was like pouring it out the next day, but people were like, "What is this?" But the fact that they reacted like that, it made me a little bit was like a mirror. I was like, "Oh, I don't actually do this, huh?" Like they don't think of me as a loving person, so I should probably,
Do this
yeah,
more.
change this part. Yeah, like be more loving.
Yeah. And did you it sounded like you had a bit of an integration process where you shared your experiences with your group. Were there any
Mhm.
other crazy stories or relatable experiences that other people had?
Yeah, there was a ton. I mean, there was some people didn't feel it that much. Some people were in a different dimension. Like it
Oh,
was a
wow.
whole array of experiences. Yeah, I it's so strange that we're all in such a small space together,
Right.
processing so many different things. It's all in our own way and all just channeling and going a different route. Like it's almost beautiful. But no one really had like a really bad experience to my knowledge.
That's pretty
Um,
lucky.
yeah, I really loved my group so much. And I think it really helped to share. And also the first week I've also shared a lot of my grief and sorrow. So it was like sharing to friends. They knew what we're going through. To go through this journey together over 12 days was really magical.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoyed that safe space. We have a WhatsApp group now after we always keep each other in touch, updating each other. Like it's almost like a support system, even post ayahuasca.
Right.
Because I reached out after as well because I was like, is anybody feeling that, you need to check in a bit because sometimes these retreats,
Yeah.
they plop you in and you leave. You're like, what am I supposed to do now? Like,
Just go back to the
right?
real world.
Yeah. Where's the aftercare? Like how check in on us. Like, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
We
Like,
went
"All
through
right, we got
all
your money, bye."
yeah. So I really feel like this retreat did a good job of like keeping us connected, having the community alive, really having the support system even until now.
Yeah, definitely can mirror that
Yeah.
aspect of, keeping in contact with the people that were in my retreat afterward. I still
Mm.
call a couple of people and just check in with them, and there is something about knowing that you survived that experience together that's incredibly bonding. And I don't know, I think because from the beginning, you're not doing the surface conversations of what's the weather like where you're from? You're talking about like, okay, what are your childhood traumas and like what are you
Yeah.
trying to process? And so from the jump, it just becomes incredibly, beautiful and then you bond very
Mm.
quickly with people because of that.
Isn't that wild? I feel like I just like released. I've never shared this much with like group of strangers. Like even my best friends don't know
Right.
the amount of traumas I hold. But to the group, and I was like, here, all of it.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I know, it's so crazy. It just makes you realize, like, the walls that you put up subconsciously that you may
Mm.
not realize because you don't wanna burden your friends or you don't feel like it's, the right space to share, but we should,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think our vulnerabilities and our traumas, like, if we share those things, there's so many lessons that you can learn from the stuff that people have gone through, you know?
Mm.
Which is why I'm
Absolutely.
starting this podcast. So yeah, one of the experiences I had when I was on ayahuasca was Mother Aya showing me that one of my strengths is that I'm really able to connect with people and to allow people to be themselves around me.
Mm.
And she told me that you should totally explore the idea of just having conversations with people about the things that they have gone through in life, their vulnerabilities, their vulnerable experiences, their traumas, and just talking about the lessons that you've taken from those things. So, part of my integration after my ayahuasca experience is just kind of exploring that space with this podcast and seeing what happens. So, we'll see where it goes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So exciting. You're like taking this step already. It's beautiful.
Yeah, life's short. Life is too short.
So true. So true.
Um, so if you were to describe your ayahuasca experience in one word, what would that word be?
Hmm. I would say self-love.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I can
And
feel that
you?
from you.
Yeah.
Um, I would say dynamic.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, because it was a lot. So I had only described the first night,
Mm.
but then part of my retreat, they only give you I wouldn't say like a half dose, but somewhere between a half dose and a full dose, just so they see how your body responds to it. And then
Mm.
you can opt to drink more of the ayahuasca brew that night. And then also on the second night, you start from a full dose and then you can opt to drink even more. So, if I were to describe the first night, it was very nurturing and loving. And the main message that I
Mhm.
was kind of telling you about before was to let things go with love. If I were to describe the second night, it was very aggressive and dominant.
Oh my god.
And the experience started with feeling like there was this very intense spiritual pressure in the room, and it was
Mm.
weighing down on me, and it felt like I was suffocating, but not in the sense of I couldn't breathe, but suffocating from the intensity of my thoughts and my emotions and how they were just like constantly swirling through my head and moving from one topic to another. And right when it felt like I was going to lose my mind and it was too much, I would hear the shaman playing music, and that would
Mm.
ground me and calm me and bring me back down. And then it would ramp up again. and it would be this cycle of almost feeling like I was going insane all night. And after it was done, I kinda had this complete, like, I am so glad that I survived that because that was one of the hardest things that I had to do, you know? And even though every
Yeah.
cycle, it felt like it was becoming a little bit more bearable before the next cycle started, it was just overall a really tough mental and emotional process for me to get through that. It felt like my system
Mm.
was under stress, and
Mm.
I took from that to mean that no matter what happens to me in life, no matter what life throws at me, I will survive it and I will become stronger. But it does mean that that process can be very uncomfortable and very difficult at the same time. So, yeah, having those sort of 2 energies together on different nights made it a very dynamic experience.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested in doing it another time, and I'm interested in doing a multi-night drinking ceremony just because I think you get a little bit deeper into your psyche. I'm a little bit nervous to do that, but I feel like I'm also ready. I was expecting my first drink to be like completely psychotic, actually, because all my sessions with like the shaman I see here in Netherlands, like they've been intense, you know. So I was really preparing for this like ridiculous night of like traumatic heaviness, and so I got out a very light and beautiful ceremony, which I'm really happy about. But I feel like that my next one, similar to yours, will also be a bit more aggressive and dynamic.
Yeah.
So I almost like want to go through that in some way, you know, to like really push myself and see if I can calm myself down. Because I feel like now I'm prepared with breathwork techniques. I meditate a lot. I feel like I have the right tools to take myself out of this space. So it's almost like a test to see how present can you be and how can you handle these situations when you're under stress.
And it makes me realize why they said you should include more of those activities in your things to do as part of retreat preparation. Because the more you get into meditation and breath work, I think the more you can sort of sit in a storm. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, but it does mean that you kind of have at least a clear route to say, okay, I can do this activity and that's going to help me survive to the end. So I
Hmm.
completely get that.
Do you feel like you're less anxious a little bit after the ceremony? Like I felt like I was floating for a few months after, actually.
Yeah, yeah, like, my perspective on life has changed a bit. I mean, I think I'll always have anxiety of some sort,
Mm.
but I think my relationship with it is changing. It doesn't feel like this thing that rules me as much, so much as it feels like I'm sitting down with an old friend, and I know its
Yeah,
flaws and, like, we can, like, have a good laugh together, but it's still there. So yeah, I see that relationship changing. And that's, to your point about self-love, that's my relationship with myself is changing. And so I think my relationship with my own anxiety is reflecting that change as well.
that's beautiful.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean, this all happened last month, right? So I'm still very much so in the glow or the afterglow of that
Hmm.
experience. And I think the world can be really good at sort of weighing you down again or, sort of like bringing you
Hmm.
back to old habits. So I'm kind of curious to see how I will go forward, with these new insights.
Mm.
Uh, So how long has it been for you since your ayahuasca experience?
I did it January 2023, so like almost like a year and a half ago.
Okay. And so in that timeline, how do you think your perspective has changed on it?
I think last year for me, ayahuasca kind of kicked off this like intensely spiritual year for me. I also wanted last year to be this deep cleanse. I did combo ceremonies after that as well with the you asked me about at the at the
Yeah.
wedding.
That's what started it all.
Yeah. I felt like last year was just like in a really intense transformational year for me where I discovered myself and I really put my social kind of like priorities very, very low. I didn't really drink that much. I was trying to keep my diet because I was just so high off ayahuasca. I was like I was so desperately trying to hold on to this feeling of just pure bliss and like joy and happiness and love. I really loved that space I was in. So I was really trying to hold
Right.
on to that. And I do feel like at times it's slipping away because like the further I am away from it. Um, but I feel like it's also important to bring back certain things that you do enjoy. Like I didn't drink much at all last year. I think we had a glass of wine at the wedding together. Like
Mhm.
it's all right to have a balance in life. I think last year I was very extreme in doing only spiritual things, only meditating, being vegan, no alcohol. And now this year I'm slowly integrating some pieces that I like, but being more mindful about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the beautiful part of balance, like you were saying, because
Yeah.
you've seen both sides of the spectrum, and now you're kinda
Mhm.
figuring out where you fit in between. And
Mm.
so, it takes time and it's a bit of trial and error. And it's also
Mhm.
you have to be very intentional about, what you want and what you say yes and no to, especially when it comes to your friends, because, our friends could definitely easily get you down that path of like having too much fun all the time. So then you're like, okay, well, where do I say no?
I'm curious to see how your journey will play out as well in your coming year.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it'll be on this podcast, so it'll be out there for people to hear.
But I feel like I do feel like even though like a lot of things have happened in my life since then as well, and I do feel a bit better equipped to handle stressful situations or just like traumatic life events. I'm like, you know what? It's not the end. Like it's there's still more life to live. I'm just more gentle with myself in general, with like work, with friends, relationships, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, just being more soft. I felt like I was a really strict and like aggressive person before, very like follow the rules kind of type, always scheduled. My calendar was always filled with events and plans and dinner. And I was like, who am I doing this for? Like, is it for me or is it for everyone else? So I kind of stopped the people pleasing. I stopped like the all of that and really focused on myself, which I'm quite happy about.
Nice. Well, what if you never tried ayahuasca? How do you think your perspective on life would be different?
Oh my goodness. I think it'd be a lot different. I really feel like that was like a kickstart to a huge life shift in terms of my diet, my priorities, just the way I view life. Yeah, I don't know what that would have been like. Probably not when we're doing this podcast for sure.
Yeah, as a sliding doors moment for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you
Yeah.
feel the same?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of what you were saying about self-love resonated with me because I
Hmm.
think that was the crux of my experience with ayahuasca as well. And so if I hadn't done it, I think my relationships would be different. And I mean relationships because not only my relationship with myself, but like my relationship with my friends and the activities that I want to let into my life. So it really was like that pivotal moment where I just started looking at everything in my orbit very differently. And so if I didn't have that experience, I would be a completely different person, I think, or at least going down a completely different path. And then by the end of that, you are a completely different person.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm glad I did it.
Same, same, same. Do you feel the call to do it again in the future?
Maybe not, surprisingly.
Wow. Okay. Night two was too aggressive for you.
It was too dynamic. Um,
Mm.
I guess I would describe it as ayahuasca to me feels like a very rare gem. So something that I would only do once, maybe twice in a lifetime. And for how my mind works, I think the real beauty of ayahuasca happens after the ceremony. First,
Mhm.
there's obviously that relief that you get because you've survived it. But I think the most important part of the integration process is how do you bring that insight to your everyday life? And most of the time, I know what I should be doing. For whatever reason, I may choose to do it or not to do it.
Mhm.
But the important part of ayahuasca is knowing, at least for me, that if I can choose to do those things that I should be doing more often, I don't need to necessarily chase after the ayahuasca experience to maintain that mindset. It's more
Mm.
of just reinforcing my everyday life. So that's my take on it. But I completely understand the call to do it again from other people because I think it's such a good reset experience or experience to like call you back to what you should be doing. But it definitely sounds like you want to do it again.
I would say so. Maybe not in the near future. I feel like last year was my, year of intense transformational ceremonies, and I feel like
Mm.
I've gone through enough of that.
Yeah, now you need a little
And
break.
yeah, I need a minute to
Yeah.
like integrate. So I'm trying to do this year more just like gentleness and love and like approaching things with, yeah, a little bit less on the intense side. But
Yeah.
I do feel called to do it again in like a multi night, because I find I was in Peru as well earlier this year, and like a friend of mine recommended this shaman in the north of Peru that hosted ceremonies, but they were closed. Not, I think in April they were not open, so
Mm.
I felt like that kind of detoured my plans a bit. But you can't plan for these things, I guess. So I was like, all right, not my time. I shouldn't have done it this year, but I do want to do it in the future.
Do you think that you would do it in the Netherlands? Because I think they've started doing it there as well, haven't they?
I think so. Yeah, I don't really feel tied to the Netherlands
Mm.
for a spiritual ceremony per se. Like I really feel like I like going to the roots of this. I mean, you went to Peru, it's
Yeah.
like there's a certain energy there that you get. Not to say there aren't amazing shamans here. I'm sure these programs here are also good, but I'm just someone that likes to really immerse myself in the culture with the people, and really it feels a bit more authentic.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean, it's where it's from. And, there are
Mm,
people that have been living around the culture of the plant for generations and they pass on that
exactly.
wisdom. So I can understand that perspective a lot. Do you think that you have
Mm.
any advice for anyone considering trying ayahuasca?
Mm. I forgot what I told you. I would say just like trust the process,
Yeah.
let go, even surrender to it. There's no amount of control you can do with your mind or anything. You have to surrender, which is super hard thing and super hard concept to do.
Yeah, especially when you're used to always being in control of something.
Yeah, I'm a control freak. It was hard for me to surrender. But honestly, after I did it, I was like, oh, it's not so bad, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. No, I vibe with that advice. And also I think that it's important to know that just because you have a specific intention or mindset, it doesn't mean that
Mm,
you'll get what you're looking for, but you'll definitely
almost
get,
never.
the thing that you need to get out of that experience. So just being, to your point, being open and trusting the process.
Maybe you'll want to do it in a few years or so. We'll check back in after your integration.
Yeah. I just don't know if I could sit through drinking ayahuasca again. The taste is so off-putting. I mean,
Oh, really? You didn't like
yeah,
the taste?
no, it tastes like shit and licorice.
Oh, wow. Your brew must have been different. I didn't mind the taste actually so much.
Yeah,
But I mean,
yeah,
every shaman brews it differently with different like spices and herbs. So
yeah, and
yeah.
also,
But,
just like it is incredibly transformative, but that feeling I had the morning after, because 'cause I'm, like, fasting all day. Then I have, this intense emotional and mental and spiritual experience. And it felt
hmm.
like the day after both of my ceremonies, I had to bring myself back from the brink. And it was sort of like this
Yeah.
slow process of, can I even get up? Okay. Can I wash my face?
Mm,
And okay, let me try and get some food and, reflect and journal and slowly bringing myself back to life. And it's nice to go through that experience to know that I can nurture myself in that way to bring myself back, but I also would not be excited to go back to that space again?
so you did it back to back,
Yeah, exactly.
but
Um,
you didn't eat in between.
so we ate breakfast on both days, and that was it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine day 2 was a bit harder.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I also before my retreat started, they said you have to fast, that night. So I stopped eating at 8 p.m. the night before my retreat, and then they didn't feed us actually the first day on the retreat, and I had an ayahuasca ceremony that night, and then I ate the first
Wow.
breakfast the next day. So it was like this
Oh.
crazy long fast that I had never done.
Yeah.
And so that was definitely really tough to, like I felt like I was, like,
Mm.
having to step very slowly or I would just
Mm.
faint because I didn't have any calories to give myself
Yeah.
energy. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that was
Did you
intense.
stay at the retreat center as well? Like, was it close to where you're sleeping?
Yeah, so it was kind of like a compound. Like the
Okay.
entire retreat center had these really tall, like high fences. So that part felt very secure and safe. And then within the
Mm.
compound, there were just all these little hotel rooms where you had your own private room and your bathroom. And then there was a communal kitchen. And then the hall where you did ayahuasca. And then sprinkled in between all of those buildings were different gardens and different pathways that you could just sort of take and just relax in different nooks.
Mm.
So it was a really nice setting, and I'm very glad for that and for the people I'm with because, I mean, both those things play into how your ayahuasca experience goes. If you don't feel
Mhm.
comfortable in a space or you're with people who you don't trust, obviously those are things that are going to be weighing on you because it is an incredibly vulnerable experience
Mm.
just to be like cocooned in a bed on ayahuasca experiencing these visions and you're not really in tune to your physical environment that much, so
Mm.
you want to make sure that you're in a safe environment.
Did you feel connected to the other 2 people at your retreat? Because you kind of, like, jumped in day 1 and started drinking, and, like, you didn't really have any time to get to know each other, you know?
Yeah, so well, we got there pretty early, so we were there like around noon, and then the ayahuasca ceremony started at 8 p.m. and we didn't have anything scheduled beforehand, and so we had all gravitated towards just like asking each other questions beforehand and getting to know our
Mm.
stories. And
Mm.
then part of the ritual of ayahuasca at that retreat center was to discuss your intentions out loud as a group and kind of go over the process. So those moments helped, bind us a little more. But yeah, I think it would have been preferable to have your setup where you had different activities leading up to ayahuasca to get to know people.
Mm. Yeah. It was nice to have at each other. I feel like each person next to me, I knew like what they were going through. So I was also like in a way holding space for the people around me. And they were also holding space for me. It was like, yeah, I felt really, really supported and I felt
Yeah.
safe. I had 2 people around me who both done ayahuasca before. I was like, I want to put myself in
Yeah,
space too.
sandwiched.
Like, yeah, I'm a sandwich between like these 2 guys. I was like, this feels good. I felt safe.
Nice, nice. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share about your experience?
Hmm. I don't think so. No.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and for being really open
Thank
about your
you.
experience.
Of course. I'm happy to hear about yours as well. I've been dying to catch up for quite some time.
I know.
But I knew what space I was in after I did ayahuasca. I was like not in the mood to just like start sharing right away. So I wanted to like give you the space to process and integrate and journal because it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's still stuff that I think about to this day that pop up,
Mm.
and I try to journal as much as I could after both experiences. But you're right, it's just so much information, whether it's
Yeah.
emotional or mental or spiritual, trying to
Hmm.
record everything and then realizing that I'll be able to digest it over time. But I think that's kind of the beautiful thing is it's a very complex, layered experience. So you can revisit multiple times, sort of like watching an old movie and then you notice something
Yeah.
new. If you liked this episode, hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts or wild stories. Your feedback is like gold to us and keeps the good stuff coming. Also, follow us on social media and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep reflecting and exploring. Peace.